I am here talking with Chelle Frost, who is our director of programs and primarily overseeing. In the past, it's been Grit, but now you've added adventure and TTC to your portfolio in your job. You have a really interesting story, and so I don't want to get too much in the way of it, but if you could just how did you get involved with NICA and the North Carolina League?
So we moved here, we being my two kids and I, moved here from New York in late 2016. And we had never been to Lenore ever in our lives when we showed up with a moving truck. Um, I took my kids registered from school. They came home from the first day and we were helping unpack the moving truck. And Maddie was talking about this new friend that she made at school. And one of the things I'd promised the kids when we moved was I'd buy them new bikes because I didn't want to deal with moving their bikes down as well. And she had met someone whose father was a bike shop owner in our town. So she was begging at the end of the day if we could go walk around town and see what our new town looked like and find this bike shop. So we did. And we walked in and I found you. And the friend was your son Owen. So we walked in and you were like, oh, hey, there's a league that North Carolina is starting for youth mountain biking, and we have an interest meeting tomorrow. You should come. And we came, and here we are. So my son was old enough the first year, and then Maddie rode around with Owen while they were practicing. And by the time the next season came around, and she was in sixth grade, she was stoked to do it. But she was afraid because it was really mostly boys, the student athletes, and they were all pretty experienced riders. So it was an intimidating idea for her to try it because she was just able to feel slightly confident getting on her bike and pedaling it at that point. She could ride a bike, but she was used to riding a much smaller bike and not on trails. So I had promised her that if she was brave enough to be bad at something new, that I would sign up to coach and I would be far worse than she would. And we would stick it out together and both be horrible or stick it out until we weren't horrible anymore. And she loved it. And it turned out really great for me as an adult and as a parent, but also for my kids, more importantly, to have such a really awesome community of people because we got plugged in with the Caldwell team. We got plugged into like the league staff right away because I just started volunteering at event weekends and it was really fun. And my kids could be there with me and I could be watching them race. But we also got plugged into the Northwest North Carolina Mountain Bike Alliance right away. So it was a community of people that were like empowering my kids to get out there and be part of maintaining these trails, learning about how they got there, and just caring about things beyond themselves. So we went from having nobody when we showed up to having people all over the state that were really super like empowering, kind people. So
And there's a couple of things that kind of stand out for me from that time. When you all first came in, I remember I had been just super self-conscious about being the creepy dude that was asking young kids like what grade they were in, that came into the shop, because I think that was like, uh you all came in and we were talking about bikes, and then I just looked at Cole and I was like, what grade are you in, man? And he was like, seventh grade. I'm like, sweet, we're having this meeting and it's tomorrow night, and like, and so like being very self-conscious of uh how wrong that could appear to people. And then the other thing that really stands out is that first year, like just how much Golden and I were just seat of the pants doing everything that first season. And I remember at one point you were like, would you like help with food on race weekends? And I was like, oh my God, yes. Like all these like thousands of details that we had never, we were just sort of like trying to throw together. And then you were like, I can do food. I've got this. And then after that, like food during the race weekends was amazing. Like we had these big spreads, and I remember going to races and like all the other kids, like, kind of looking over at us with, you could hear their stomachs growling and they were drooling, and, it's like, oh, okay. So, you kind of came in and you made an immediate impact. And I think it was uh you were very you were very forthright in that you just said, "Hey, would you like help with this?" And I think that was something that was really um we felt really lucky with having a person like that involved with the team, because that's not necessarily the case with all parents, and it's something that I think all parents, I would encourage them, like, you bring something to the table like everyone does. And I think that was sort of your way of going, here's this thing that I feel comfortable doing, and would that be of help to you? And it really was. It was like, so it had such an impact on us that over the race weekends, that it was like this huge deal. And it was just something that you seemed so comfortable with. And so, I don't know that I've ever told you that how much I appreciated that very first thing that you asked of us, but we appreciated that immensely. And I think that really helped us value you and feel how much more kind of you could do for us, whenever you felt comfortable with it. So, and I think at one point you kind of came and you were like, if I got a bike, would that be helpful? And I'm like, absolutely, and I think that's such a huge thing. And what I saw with you that made such an impact for our team and ultimately for our league was your whole family being involved. It was not just like you kind of dropping the kids off and picking them up. It was this like level of involvement that became just sort of like this thing that you all did together. And that was great, because I think ultimately that's the goal of everything we want to do, is that, like, we want families to go out and mountain bike and have fun.
Yeah, and I think that my experience I was very lucky that I got tapped into your team specifically right off the bat, because you and Golden did a really good job of creating a team where I felt comfortable being like, I haven't been, I'm honest, I haven't been on a bike in 15 years. I've never been on a mountain bike, but here's what I can offer is this a value? Like, can I help in this area? And then once I did ask if I could coach, and if that would be helpful or more of a hindrance, that you had no hesitation being like, absolutely. And meeting where I was at and making sure that I felt supported in figuring out what I needed to do, what the steps were to become a coach. And it was really great for me. Also, just like one of my favorite things I think about our league specifically is that our sport can be expensive. And as a single mom coming here, like also right before we moved here, I had just finished up kind of 4.5 years of cancer treatment. So getting to a point where my kids could do sports and stuff like that, and that was something that we could prioritize, is just living a normal life. That sometimes people take for granted, that what my kids were doing, there's only one of me, and I can only get them to so many places at one time. So I got lucky that they wanted to do the same thing, and that it was something I could do with them, so that we could be out living life and doing these things that we'd missed out on for years. So being able to do that with a group of people that are like really empowering of you and willing to involve you wherever you're comfortable, and work from there, was really a good thing, because there's a lot of sports I know that if you don't bring to the table exactly what they're looking for, it's kind of like, no, there's not really a place for you to help with this. So it was really cool as a single mom to find a sport where I could do this with my kids. Especially because when we moved here, they weren't necessarily old enough to be just venturing out on their own and hope that they come back, if I couldn't go with them. So that really made a big difference in my kids progressing and sticking with the sport, as well as me being able to get involved and be a part of that with them. But also just that what we did bring to the table at every level of our involvement right from the start was something that people felt was a value, but made us feel like we were valued, that in that space was a really big deal, because I also know a lot of places that a lot of sports that my kids have done before, where if we didn't know all there was to know already, you didn't feel important in that space or like you were bringing any value. And I think that's something cool that I really like in our league, and something I like to help other people see when they show up in our league, is like, no matter what you bring to the table, there's a space for you here. Like, if you're willing to show up and you want to make this great for the kids in our league and the families in our league, then there's like a million ways that you can do that. And if you don't see one that exists already that appeals to you, there might be something else that we're not already doing that you could bring to the table and help with. So I think that's become one of my favorite things. And it's also something I was fortunate to experience when I first got involved. So
Well, and I think like your your background and those feelings that you're talking about, like I feel like that really dovetails in with what, as a league we're trying to do, but you specifically are trying to do with these other programs that are putting on events that are different from race events. So now you've been successfully managing grit. You took over grit and it's just exploded, what you've done with grit, and now adding adventure and then teen trail core, and seeing all of the work that you are doing in conjunction with the committees that work beside you with those things, and seeing how you're creating all these spaces for student athletes and coaches to kind of explore more of what our sport is about. What do you see as sort of like your your sort of aspirations for these programs?
I think that my number one overall hope for all of them is that, like, again, anybody that comes to our league, whether that's a student athlete or a coach or a parent who doesn't think they're going to be a coach or doesn't know yet, but I do when I meet them. I'm very upfront about it too. They'll be like, "Oh, I'm not going to coach," and I'm like, "You think that?" But I just want to create this community in our league where there is a space for everybody, no matter what they want cycling to look like for them. Whether that's, I just want to ride a couple days a week at my local trail and that's all I ever aspired to do, but I find that fun and it gets me outside. It gets me somewhere where I am getting out of my head and I'm in a healthy place, doing something good for myself, taking care of myself, or it's I want to be a professional athlete. Whatever that is, that there's a space for everybody, but also that nobody sell themselves short, because I have watched so many student athletes now who were super performance oriented start to get a little burnout and then rally when they had spaces like grit where they remember that, hey, I've got friends here and this can just be for fun sometimes, or parts of it can and parts of it can be completely about performance for me, but there's importance in all of those things and keeping that balance. And I've really enjoyed watching that happen and getting to be a part of that. I've enjoyed watching so many kids who show up, and this is kind of like uh, definitely the majority of female student athletes in our league. When they show up at a race week, and it's the first time I've met them in grit, and we'll do introductions, and they'll be like, "I'm so and so, and I'm here because my dad made me, and my brother does this." And then there's always the follow up, "But I'm not racing," and we're like, "Okay, that's great. We're really glad you're here." And it's so cool to watch with no pressure whatsoever what happens when you just make people feel valued and just help them build confidence doing what they want to do, making it fun. And I think we've been really lucky. We have a really awesome community within Grit that is very welcoming. Some of our most performance oriented student athletes love few things more than empowering other kids just to have fun and try something new, even if they don't want to race. Been really cool to watch so many kids progress from showing up and being like, "I'm here 'cause my dad made me," to kids who their dad has to drag them away at the end of the day because they're just having so much fun with their friends. And it is very, very rare that one of those kids shows up and gets really engaged in grit and doesn't end up racing just because they want to do all the things with those friends. And they might never have a goal of being on podium. They just want to be out there riding their bikes. And to me, like, that's the best, is helping every kid and every coach find the thing that they love about riding bikes.
Thank you very much, Shell.
Thanks.